Do they realize that this looks like it's straight out of a movie where the prisoner exchange happens? Russian officials approach, American officials approach. Trade off from one prisoner to another. There's Brittney Griner there in the red jacket on the left. And Victor Bout, who has then been transitioned back to his folks. On a tarmac, loud tarmac, blurred out faces. We're never gonna know who these guys are ever again. Manila envelopes in hand, like all this looks just like straight out of a movie. But the breakdown of this release and that exchange was also documented on the plane as well. Let's watch more of that.
Фамилия. Приедешь сюда? Да? Молодец. Приезжай. Первая.
I'm good.
What's your mood?
Happy?
Happy? Well, are you ready for long flight?
Yes.
Вы летите домой.
You fly back home to the US.
To the US.
Да, конечно. Так что все будет нормально.
Everything will be fine.
It's hard not to smile and feel good for the process that she's going with, considering she probably didn't know when she was coming back, was gonna sit through that sentence, had already gotten to the penal colony there in Russia to serve that time with not much else to do. As we saw yesterday, President Biden was also flanked by her wife and also Vice President Kamala Harris as they talked about this whole thing. So the happiness was surrounding everyone, right? Well, we still remember Victor Bout there, who was part of that exchange. He got on his own plane as well. Everything is documented. This is crazy to me. Watch more.
Смотрит вас. Присаживайтесь. Что, ну мы же встречали вас. Сколько бы ждали этого встречи?
So let's get to the messy part. How about that, you guys? We know the fallout, the talk that has been happening. It's countless. You can't even go through all of it, from Tucker Carlson to former President Trump, to every other pundit you could imagine. Also to just the general comments in sections where people talked about this, celebrations from folks, NBA players talking about it. Of course, WNBA commissioner was on. It was a huge, huge story yesterday, which made some people bristle because of that other prisoner, Paul Whelan, that we did speak about, who's been in prison, I think 3 to 4 years now, and serving out time there as well. And this thought process, this narrative that's been pushed around now is they chose one. Because the simplicity of such a thing, I guess people just assume it's elementary. And President Biden went and had a negotiation, and Vladimir Putin, this is the picture in their heads. And Vladimir Putin said, I can give you Paul Whelan, but I won't. Oh no, I'll give you Paul Whelan and I wanna keep Brittney Griner. And then Biden says, you know what? Forget Paul Whelan. I'd like Brittney instead because she's black and she's lesbian and she's really tall. That's what they say is happening. No lie, we'll get to some of that soon. But actually, one person in particular that we should probably care how he feels about this whole thing, maybe is Paul Whelan. He spoke about it, he was talking to CNN, how he feels about this whole thing and how it went down. Let's watch.
They've always considered me to be at a higher level than other criminals of my sort. And for whatever reason, I'm treated differently than another individual here from a Western country that's also on a charge of espionage. So even though we're both here for espionage, I'm treated much differently than he is. And my treatment is also much different than others held for espionage at other prisons. I would say that if a message could go to President Biden that this is a precarious situation that needs to be resolved quickly. And I would hope that he and his administration would do everything they could to get me home, regardless of the price they might have to pay at this point.
Regardless of the price they may have to pay at this point, he'd like for them to get him home. As President Biden also said, they're gonna be relentless in that effort as well. Again, we don't know the ins and outs of it. There was, again, someone who was an expert on this yesterday that as I watched, as this whole thing unfolded, they said there's so many players, so many negotiations, so many different things said and done with this weird teetering of these negotiations that it's not a cut and dry, hey, we chose one and didn't bring the other. But from Paul Whelan's point of view, he can say, hey, I'm still waiting. Of course, who would not say that? His family, as we pointed out yesterday, was a little bit more nuanced in it. We can understand that as well. These are the folks that maybe we can pay attention to how they feel about it. But I think they also understand how the whole thing works. So if you don't know how the whole thing works, I think you should probably have less to say about exactly what it is that happened. Because no, I don't know what happened either. But I do know one American's home and we're still working on the other. Here's what his family said yesterday. His brother specifically had to say. His name is David Whelan, and he said in a statement that while he can literally only imagine the joy she will have being reunited with her loved ones and in time for the holidays, the inability to also bring Whelan home remains difficult for the family to process. 100%. It's so important to me that it's clear that we do not begrudge Ms. Griner her freedom, is what David Whelan said. As I've often remarked, Brittney's and Paul's cases were never really intertwined. It has always been a strong possibility that one might be freed without the other, especially considering Paul has been held much longer. So for those previous years before that, the level of anger towards anyone else that had any kind of, I guess, positive things happen for them wasn't number one news. There wasn't this comparison to, hey, how dare she have some kind of freedom and this guy doesn't. It's just not how it works. But we still have folks in conservative media specifically that are very upset about this whole thing. Conservatives particulars, look at this. Many of them slammed the White House for not securing the release of Whelan and for letting Bout go free, arguing that it would give incentives to bad actors like Russia and North Korea to arrest more Americans to be used as bargaining chips. Pause. If they got Whelan out for the same swap and deal, is that not the same incentive for folks to then maybe capture more Americans so they can have these types of swaps? Who cares which one it is? For some reason they can connect it to Britney, but not to Paul. This incentive. So you can be concerned about the incentive, but I don't think it connects because of who it is. More on that though. They said Biden just gave Putin a huge tool in the toolkit to fund and arm Russia's war machine. That's what Representative Mike Waltz said. I wonder what he said about Putin's war machine before that, or what he said about the way the rest of conservatives talked about Putin's war machine, how they were supportive of Putin's war machine. I don't know specifically what Mike Waltz has said before, but for some reason now he's concerned about Putin's war machine. Maybe he's always has been that way. One more piece, because this is probably the dumbest thing I've seen. Benny Johnson tweeted this out. Meet Brittney Griner and Marine Paul Whelan. Both Americans, both were convicted in Russian courts on dubious charges, both serving multi-year sentences in Russian prison. Brittney hates America, Paul served America. Guess which one? Biden traded a terrorist to free. Just looking for that evidence that Brittney hates America, but also they're both Americans, he says. They're both convicted on dubious charges, but Benny would like one of those folks that's considered on dubious charges to have to serve out that term because he doesn't give a damn. Because she's the type of person that he can discard. She's the type of person that we've historically discarded, and who cares? They're less than human. Oh, there's multiple strikes. She's a woman. She's a black woman. She's a gay black woman. Oh, and she's an athlete. And many other black athletes surrounded themselves and surrounded her with love and support and helped get to this point. So he hates all of that. We can support both. We can still fight to get Paul home. But that's not the objective. The objective is to divide on this.